Well, let's see if this works. Comment is Charlie. Hello. I'm Charlie. Ooh, I'm learning all sorts about Facebook Live. We're gonna wait a few minutes here for people to trickle in. Hopefully I did this right. Double check a couple things. All right, people are coming in, I think. I can't see who's coming in. We'll go ahead and wait a couple more minutes here. All right. I guess we'll go ahead and start. So I've got quite a few questions to get through. I got some, I see Todd is here. Todd is a representative from Plastic Oceans International, who I'm representing today. Hello, Todd. My name is Charlie Rolsky. I am a PhD candidate from Arizona State University. I'm getting a PhD in biology, and my background is more or less in plastic pollution, although I have done quite a bit of work with lots of other animals that are cool in the ocean, like killer whales and red-footed boobies. Those were probably pretty cool birds. I'm also the science advisor for Plastic Oceans International North America. And I do quite a bit of work there with outreach, working with different organizations, different schools, and trying to just spread the good word as much as humanly possible. I did receive quite a few questions. So in a minute, I'll go ahead and get started on them. Thank you for everyone that sent them in. That was very exciting to receive them. So we'll give it maybe another minute or so as people keep trickling in. If you have any comments or questions, please feel free to drop them in the chat. I'll try to do my best to look at the cool questions I got and also look at the chat and make sure that I'm not missing any questions. So I'm going to start with one. I got this from Sahiba, and in advance, I was teaching for like 6 years before this. I've mispronounced hundreds of names in my day. If I mispronounced your name, I'm a jerk and I'm really sorry. And then you can correct me and I'll give you a special shout out at any other point. So my first question was from Sahiba, who asked my favorite subject in class that I took. Really anything science was fun for me. PE was awesome. I love taking in college this class called animal histology, where I got to dissect a different animal every week, which was super exciting. That was probably what got me the most interested in science to begin with. I struggled a little bit with math and chemistry. Those were really hard subjects for me. I had to get quite a bit of tutoring, but in the end, I ended up learning decently well how to navigate those waters. And that's kind of where I am now. And again, I forgot to say this, but special shout out to the Footprint Foundation, special shout out to the SciTech Institute for putting this together. This is wonderful. I could not be more excited to be here. This is awesome. Sharing my house, hopefully with your house. Hopefully you're all staying safe. I'm going to keep going along with the questions. I got another question from Mo. Can we eliminate microplastics from the ocean? And which animals do you think are most affected by plastic? Those are two extremely good questions. Microplastics are the result of larger plastics breaking down over time into smaller pieces. Sometimes they're also created to be small. So in the case with facial cleansers and exfoliants, we were putting microbeads in those, and they became microplastics as soon as they were pretty much flushed down your sink. Can we eliminate them? Well, I think if we eliminate ocean pollution with plastic, then there's a good chance that we're going to reduce quite a bit of the microplastics in there. So I think that's the best start possible, is just to focus on these single-use plastics and then go from there. Any reduction in plastic is going to be a reduction in microplastics. What animals do I think are most affected? It's a good question. So macroplastics are anything bigger than a microplastic. Microplastics like this, a macroplastic is anything bigger. So if you think about plastic bags, utensils, any large plastic item, that's going to have pretty bad repercussions for any animal that accidentally ingests it. So if you think of a whale that eats too many plastic bags because it confuses it for a food source, it can absolutely cause them to, serious illness or even death. With microplastics, there's kind of a couple different threats. One is that they're really small, so they're able to penetrate virtually any ecosystem, especially in the ocean. The other is that microplastic in general doesn't like water, and a lot of contaminants that are found in the ocean don't like water. So they create this affinity for each other. And they basically act as vehicles transporting these contaminants at really high concentrations. And much of the time they're accidentally taken in by smaller animals such as shrimp or fish. And then they're able to move up the food chain and reach some really important animals and even us. So there's a couple different threats. It's a really good question. What other observations are marine biologists making about the impacts on oceans of our disrupted business as usual? That's a really good question. I think that came from Jasmine in the Polidoro lab. Big shout out. It's a good question because a lot of us aren't able to collect data right now. If we go to the ocean, there's a good chance that it's going to be blocked off. And if we do any ocean research, it's very difficult. You have to have special permission. On the other hand, we are hearing about animals changing their behavior as a response to humans not being out and about so often. So maybe there's a bit of a good and bad when it comes to the current situation with the quarantine. As a follow-up, there was a really good question. With the extreme purchase of water bottles, how do you think the ocean and landfills will be affected? I looked this up, some really quick stats. Toilet paper sales in the US in March were up 112% from the last year's month. Hand sanitizer sales are up 313%, as I'm sure we all know because none of us can get any. I've also seen too, before, when I was going out a little bit more, I noticed I wasn't able to bring my reusable bag. So, and also kind of for good reason, we want to stop the spreading of germs. To-go meals are at all-time high, that most of that is plastic. And then there's also been quite a bit of masks and gloves that are now piling up. Many of those are plastic. So we are seeing, a shift in the type and the amount of single-use plastic, especially. Whether or not right now, that's something we should be super concerned about, it's hard to say because, this virus is really serious. And we need to take as many measures as possible to be safe. That being said, maybe when things return to normal, we can kind of, go above and beyond to really reduce the amount of single-use plastic that we're using every day as much as possible, even more than before. Maybe we can make up for this by doing something along those lines. I want to jump. Let's see. So Jessica Green's class, shout out to Jessica Green. She's in here in Arizona. How does consuming plastic affect the whale's health? We kind of covered that. It can affect them by causing them to be full and they won't eat. It could also create a blockage in their stomach. Both are very dangerous. Perhaps their stomach being acidic could pull anything off the surface of the plastic that we talked about before, like some sort of pollutant. As a follow-up, they asked, what can you tell about a whale by looking at its poop? So a little backstory, I worked on a boat with the amazing poop-sniffing killer whale rescue dog named Tucker, and we would use Tucker to smell out killer whale poop because it was non-invasive. We wouldn't stress out the killer whales, and it would allow us to get really, really interesting information about the physiology, the health, the pollution in the body, whether the killer whale was male or female, if it was pregnant. So I'm kind of known as the whale poop guy, and I love that because poop is awesome. What can you tell by just looking at it? Well, in some cases, whales that eat something like krill, their poop will be really pink because that's the color of the krill, which is really funny to see in the water. Otherwise, it's hard to say. Sometimes they're classified as being pancakes. Sometimes the poop is classified as being like egg drop soup. Either way, that's kind of gross, but still super interesting when it comes to us using this to learn as much as we can about the organisms and as much as we can about their health and the health of the oceans. Let's see. I'm going to go to the chat here. What are the first steps, this is Sarah, to moving towards a more sustainable lifestyle, and how much does sustainability help struggling animals? It's a really good question. Sometimes we look at human beings and we have the animal kingdom. We kind of see them as two separate, or not animal kingdom, ecosystem, nature, what have you, but we're a part of the same ecosystem. So much of the time, our actions will directly affect the health of the ecosystem. In my world, the first steps, once things again kind of die down with the virus, the first steps would be to reduce the amount of single-use plastic and create sort of more sustainable types of products that we can then put out there that aren't going to have such a harmful effect on the ecosystem and be around for, tens of hundreds of thousands of years. Who knows how long this stuff's going to be around for. If we reduce the amount of ocean pollution, for example, especially plastic pollution, then that just creates cleaner ecosystems for the species in there. And really our impact can be directly measured by things like that. It's almost this cascading effect. You can say humans are improperly disposing of their waste, X amount. And then you can kind of look down the food chain, how then that is going to a garbage patch, or that's going to a beach, or that's going to any other kind of delicate location. So generally, when we live more sustainable lives, then the environment around us benefits. And that's something that we definitely need to circle back to once things, die down with the coronavirus. It's something that should be heavily on our radar. Really good question. Here's another good one from Chalet. What's the best career decision you've ever made? I would say in high school, I started volunteering a lot. My mom kind of pushed me into it. And at the time, I didn't love the idea, but it benefited me so much, eventually, because I built my resume at a young age. I was able to apply for internships and I was able to achieve them. And those experiences shaped me, quite a bit. I was doing internships at the New England Aquarium every summer, or I was going to Tufts and doing a veterinary school internship. All of these things were shaped by the fact that I got involved early and at a young age. Whether that's volunteering at a local animal shelter or volunteering to help do cleanups. Anything helps. It builds your resume, it builds your character as a person. So that really shaped my life at a young age and set me up for some really great experiences later on. What do you do at work on a daily basis? Well, this used to be a lot different. Now, this is my office. Welcome to my office. My office mate is behind me. She's sleeping. She's a cat. You want to come say hi, Dot? Come say hi. This is Dot. She's my office mate. Sometimes she's a little rude and standoffish. You know how you can have the cubicle problems. But for the most part, we get along pretty well. So this is my office now. We've really transitioned from doing hard lab research towards submitting grants, submitting manuscripts, making collaborative connections. There's all sorts of things that you can do at a distance, but you definitely have to shift things a little bit. So that has changed. My day-to-day has changed, but we, hopefully if everyone behaves themselves, then, we'll return to normal sooner than later. And then there was one more. What's the best thing about your job? It's a really good question. The best thing about my job is actually seeing science happen. So you have a question, what's happening? Are these killer whales stressed out, for example? Well, and then you come up with a way to test that. Let's go out and non-invasively collect their poop, right? That should come to anyone's head naturally. And so we go out and collect poop. We bring it back in the lab and start analyzing it. And then you can see, there are stress levels that are higher when there's more boats around. Because the boats, the increase in engine noise makes it so the killer whales have to shout. Shouting uses up their resources. And then what you can eventually do is take all of these things and put them in a package to deliver to folks to get them better protection. And when you can see that kind of process, play out, it's an incredible feeling, and it's just sort of a testament, to what science can accomplish. Oh, we've got Alyssa. Hi, Alyssa's my former undergrad who killed it in the lab with us in the Halden lab. She's got a good question here. Can you explain why voting is an important step towards doing your part to take care of the earth and its ecosystems? And what's your advice for wanting to get involved in a governmental, but I'm not sure if it's worth it. It's a really great question. We need to strongly consider the environment. So right now, like we said before, the environment's getting a ton of, at least from my department, plastic pollution, plastic usage, and it's going to kind of push us to a place that we haven't maybe been before because we are using so much of it and we're disposing so much of it, and it's really difficult to recycle. So what we need to consider then is this impact on the planet and absolutely sort of understand that things like climate change and our effect on the planet, our effect on the momentum of climate change factor into our future. And we can all see right now how scary it is when we have to deal with some sort of disaster. And how it changes, it shifts everything for us. It's not so easy to get food anymore. It's not so easy to get cleaning supplies. This is all very scary. And it's almost a preview for us to see what happens when we start running out of these really delicate resources. So this should be a wake-up call for us. And once we return back to normal, we need to then strongly consider what actions we can take moving forward to prevent climate change from getting worse. what we can do now to become more sustainable. I mean, this is really going to impact our future as well as the future of the planet. In terms of on a governmental level, there are quite a few internships and opportunities to connect with people at government organizations. They do incredible research there. I always recommend looking for jobs. So these are groups that are posting jobs pretty actively and all over the world, which is really great. And so there's ample opportunities to get involved on a governmental and an NGO level. So definitely be on the lookout for internships, be on the lookout for volunteer opportunities for jobs. It's a really good question, Alyssa. What got me interested? I think I kind of look at, and that's from, let's use that from Michaela or Mikhaili. I'm sorry if I mispronounced that. I sort of see the ocean like a lot of people see space. So when I look at, the waves, and I'm always curious about what's underneath there. Maybe 9 times out of 10, it's nothing. We have this perception that the ocean, that as soon as you put your head under, you're going to see this like Great Barrier Reef, when much of the time it's just empty. But it's that fascination with not knowing what's in there. It's that, and we're so out of our element. We can barely explore it. We can barely stay below the water for very long. So there's so many mysteries, and to me, that is just the most exhilarating feeling. Is just not knowing what's under there. And so I think my family was always very nature oriented, and we lived in some beautiful places like Montana and California on the coast. And so being in places like that just kind of fueled that sort of interest. There's another really good one here from Jana. Shout out to Jana. I've read our stay-at-home behaviors that led to quieter oceans, which contributes to reduced stress hormones and whale poop. Are there any changes that you hope to see? I mean, that's a good point. In certain areas of the world, I'm not sure about this, but if they are enforcing it so that people can't take their boats out, and there's less boat traffic on the water, then what you're going to have is a quieter ocean, and you're going to have an ocean that's got less pollution from the boats themselves, and that's not a bad thing. I don't think that's a terrible kind of turn of events that came about because of the pandemic. But there's reports. Some of them are a little bit fictitious. I think people are showing like the Loch Ness monster going into Venice, like in the canals there, to see if it's like a return to can't believe this happened. That's not so true. But I have heard reports about sea turtles returning back to beaches maybe they hadn't been before, or at the very least, if there are animals living in a certain location and there's less human pressure, less humans there, then the animals might, react better to that. They might feel more safer. They might be able to nest better. It's hard to say. I think when we return again to normal, we need to think about, is there a middle ground now? We went from everyone being there to no one being there, but maybe we can kind of meet halfway to allow the ecosystem to recover, to allow the ecosystem to kind of, get more in sync with our behaviors. It's really good questions. Let's see here. What was your hardest study? Well, again, math and chemistry. I don't know what it is. I don't get it. It's frustrating for me because I used to study for hours, and then I'd go sit down in front of a chemistry exam and I would just forget everything, and it stressed me out. I had to get quite a bit of help. I even failed math when I was an undergrad. It happens, and it's totally okay. I came back stronger. I got a tutor, dominated it the second time with a strong B minus, I want to say, or a B. Either way, it was much better. That was probably the hardest class for me to conceptualize. But once I could kind of learn things and apply them and say, okay, well, do this type of statistics as it applies to your data, then I started to understand things a little bit more. So it's a great question. What do you enjoy the most about studying? Lilibeth. Great question, Lilibeth. I think once you can hold on to something and apply it, that's really, really cool. So if I read something in a paper and then I go and we're having a class discussion or something, and that comes into my mind, and I can say, oh, by the way, I learned this, then to see that kind of your brain hold on to something and then be able to apply it to something practical is a little victory. So I enjoy that the most about studying. Researching the fecal samples as a benefit for genetic research made of orcas. That's a really good question. That came from Juan. The genetic information, we can even get the DNA of the salmon that the killer whale ate, which is mind-blowing, to be able to say, oh yeah, it's probably this species of salmon coming from this location. We can also identify the individual. So whichever individual had the poop, we can figure out who they are. And then we can even start looking at sort of the information about the gut microbiome. So what type of microbial activity is going on in that killer whale's gut? Because a lot of times that's going to indicate the health of the killer whales, is that microbial activity. So that's super interesting stuff. You would have never thought that poop would give you so much information. Um, it does not smell that bad, so I think you're probably wondering what it smells like. It smells like, at least for killer whale poops that I smelled, it smelled like kind of gnarly fish. Much better than dog poop, much better than cat poop, Dorothy. It's not nearly as bad as other species, I'm sure. So that was a good question. Oh, Diane's on here. Hello, Diane. It's good to see you. We've got another one here. When you experience whale poop or feces, what's the most part? There's a lot of questions about whale poop, as it should be. What's the most fun part in doing so? It's tough being able to find it. You have to rely on this dog's behavior. So he's sitting at the front of the boat and he's shaking his butt one way and shaking his butt the other way. And so that has to then relay to his handler. Usually it's Liz Seeley. Shout out to Liz, University of Washington, Conservation Canine. And then she has to take that information and pass it back to the vessel driver. And oftentimes it was Deborah Giles, another shout out, great researcher. And then from there, we have to find it. So it's just this process where everyone kind of has to be in tune to everyone else. We're being led by a dog. And then once you see it, you have to be able to stop the boat, get the apparatuses together, collect it, and then from there, you don't just put a lid on it. What we know is that if there's a lot of salt water in with the poop, the water can actually deteriorate a lot of the hormones and the really good information that's in the poop. So you have to pour off the salt water from the poop into another container as the vessel's rocking. And it's a crazy experience. You would have never thought collecting killer whale poop would be an adrenaline rush, but it was. And being on the ocean again there were days where we'd be on the water and there was like a carcass of a porpoise floating and the skin had been pulled off of it. And that's because close cousins of the killer whales that I was studying, they're called transients, they'll only eat marine mammals, whereas the ones I would study would only eat Chinook salmon. So we saw this just body floating in the water and picked it up. And again, you never know what to expect on the water. A story I don't like to tell because it haunts me. We were in the middle of the ocean. I think we were actually in almost Canadian waters at this point. But there was this weird thing floating in the water. It was this raft made of pointy sticks. And there was a doll, a really creepy doll, on this like makeshift funeral raft thing. And of course we kept it and it gets mailed around to people. And for some reason it gets mailed to me, which is great. So I have to figure out how to unload that onto somebody relatively soon because I'm pretty sure it's going to kill me in my sleep. But you just never know what you're going to see on the ocean. That's another kind of exhilarating part of being out there. Diane's got an awesome question. What is the best way to help kids get really into science? Well, I'm a big fan of outreach, and I think any opportunity we have, like me as a grad student, anyone as a citizen scientist, you have a platform, and you can use that platform to educate others, to inspire others, and empower others, teach people something that they don't know. That's what I always say about plastic pollution. If you learned a little trick, if you have bamboo utensils, teach someone about that. That's the best way to get things to sort of spread. And so me as a scientist, I try to do as many talks, as many outreach opportunities as humanly possible, because it just ignites this fire, especially in kids. And they end up coming back. They end up kind of being these little grassroots movements in and of themselves. The chief science officers, who I'm going to be chatting with momentarily, are a great representation of that, because what they're doing is they're taking this lead role in disseminating science to their peers, to their school, to their families, and they're promoting women in STEM. They're promoting more research in STEM, and all of these are crucial, to getting people both involved and ensuring our future is going to be bright when it comes to science and STEM in general. So get kids, outside. Right now, I know things are a little bit rough, but I always like to say that there's websites like explore.org that allow you to watch live cams at different places in the natural world, which are really cool. I've gotten really into bird watching because the best whale watchers are bird watchers. So I've tried to get really good at identifying birds. You can build these little sort of containers that are helpful for insects in the area to come make homes. All these things, you plant plants that pollinators appreciate. All these little things, if you get kids involved, it really sparks their interest, and they end up carrying that with them, for a really long time. It's so important. It's so much fun to be with. It's just, I can't say how important that is. That's why I'm happy to be at ASU. where I have that opportunity. Plastic Oceans is incredible outreach, and get them involved as early as possible. Even now, we were gonna watch. We did watch the story of plastic. All these documentaries are just great to get people sort of interested and provide resources for schools, come up with programs. I've got this neat outreach thing. I want to make sure I don't go too long, 5 minutes. This neat outreach thing I do where basically you can do this whole plastic demonstration by getting a sort of a container of stuff like dry beans, and then within the beans put something else in there that's kind of representative of plastic. You can give kids different types of mouths. So like a crab would be a comb. You could simulate a bird by, I don't even know what it's called. It's like that thing that you use in the kitchen to grab. You could use tongs, that's fine. Anyways, you can use chopsticks for using pinchers, and basically take a cup, mix all that stuff together, and tell kids, I want you to fill up your cup. Your cup is your stomach, so eat as much as you can. And generally they'll fill the cup up after they're done fighting each other with the utensils, and then show them, you filled your stomach up, but it's full of these little plastic bits. And then you can use that as an opportunity to teach them, this is what the plastic bits can do to your stomach, of the animal, of what have you. And then I have them throw it up because they think throw up is funny. And then I say, okay, now I want you to eat the same way, but avoid the plastic. And so they take their time. And usually I time them for about 5 seconds to do this. And then after 5 seconds, there's only a couple, little pieces of actual food. And so basically you have to tell them, would you rather eat a ton of this food and be inundated with plastic, or would you rather eat, selectively, and it takes much longer to fill your stomach up. So these are all things that I like to do to sort of get people involved and interested. And let's see, we've got a lot more questions here. We talked about that one. Let's talk about that one. What made me interested to do this career? That was Miala. I thought, really seeing a problem that needed solving is what started it for me, and learning that a lot of these animals and plants and ecosystems are facing these obstacles, and we haven't advanced far enough to be able to protect them better. So every time I get an email from someone or an individual or an organization saying we have this problem, we did that in a study in Monterey Bay, California, which is a beautiful area. And they basically reached out to us and said, we want to filter the water using this robotic vehicle all the way down to 3,000 feet. Would you look at the filters? And sure, I said, yeah, that's super awesome. Send it to me. And sure enough, I went through and found plastic microfibers all the way down to 3,000 feet below the ocean. Now, these fibers are coming from us wearing things like polyester or nylon. And then in the gray water of the wash, it ends up leaving, it goes through wastewater treatment centers, plants, and then it goes right into the ocean. It can also come from fishing nets that are breaking down over time. So that was really inspiring for me. And there's been quite a few projects that have been similar to that. And so just being around these questions, then you start asking more. And when we asked ourselves, okay, we've surveyed the water around people, let's survey the water in the middle of nowhere. This place, this little teeny island, is 6-day boat ride from Hawaii. Let's go there. There's no one there. We went there. We looked in bird poop, so poop again, of this local nesting species called red-footed boobies. And sure enough, we found fibers in a lot of their fecal samples. So these birds are nowhere near humans, and yet they're still being exposed to these fibers. So it's almost like once you open one door into a question about science and research, it opens 10 more. And it's just the most exciting, invigorating feeling, because there's always work to be done. And we always say the best questions in science are the ones that are difficult to answer, or the ones that create more questions. So that's kind of a long answer on that. But it looks like we are running out of time. So I appreciate you all bearing with me with my first Facebook Live. This was a really fun experience. I got to see some people I haven't seen in a while, so that's great. If I didn't answer your question, make sure to send me a message. I'll be happy to do so. And now we're going to hop over to Zoom, and I'm going to give a little talk on Zoom, and we'll do sort of a Q&A after that. So thank you, everyone, for tuning in. And if you're tuning into the Zoom interview, I will see you shortly.